Welcome to the Coalition for Physician Wellbeing's podcast, The Wellbeing Connector, where through our guests we explore ideas for making healthcare a better place to work and serve. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Today I'm excited to be speaking with Dr. Kathy Gibney. Kathy received her doctorate in counseling psychology from Northeastern University and her clinical training at BU Medical Center and the Center for Multicultural Psychology. For 37 years, she has been providing counseling, consulting, education, and training to individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities in a variety of clinical settings, and she's a diplomat of the American Board of Psychologists. Until recently, she was the director of the Center for Wellbeing at AdventHealth, where she led initiatives to support physicians, advanced practice providers, and their families, and create educational opportunities to support the hospital's well-being culture. Finally, Kathy has taught classes at the university level for over 30 years, including psychology courses at the University of Arizona and University of Notre Dame, where she was awarded the Knepp Teaching Award. Well, thank you, Kathy. I'm so glad you're able to join us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited.
Well, great. Let's get started. I've been reading in your background that you're a diplomat in the American Board of Psychologists, and in particular, early in your career, you had a specialty dealing with families going through trauma, particularly murders, and that's a specialty that I haven't heard of before. Can you tell me about how you got into that?
It was many years ago when actually trauma was just starting to be researched, and I was studying in Boston and had an opportunity to work with a community center that had started a new program working with people in an African American community where there had been many murders in the community and accidents, mostly shootings. And so I had an opportunity to work with a group of the survivors of that and just started doing research with a person from Boston College. And that was where it all began.
So is there anything special you do for people who are dealing with coping with a murder? Are there some special techniques that you use?
Not special anymore. Now there's a lot of research. At the time, there were very few things that were available. We didn't know a lot. All of the trauma research was really based on military research, and that's been really the basis of a lot of it that's going forward. But there is a technique that a lot of people use, which is called EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and that's quite effective when someone has had a trauma of any kind, and it's also very helpful when there's a murder, if you've witnessed it or been near it or have had a family member. It is a helpful technique.
Interesting. So the obviously the trauma related to murder is quite extreme, but what did you bring forward from that experience to working with physician wellness?
Well, trauma has influenced all the trauma research, and my work with trauma, I would say, is probably one of the bigger influences in my work and with counseling and with consulting, with everything, because when you work with someone who's been that traumatized, you learn a real respect for, because they teach you. You have to learn to be able to walk with somebody so fragile, and you want to approach it from a place of absolute respect, not to make any assumptions about what the person is experiencing or what it's meant to them, to really learn to listen to the story. And there were so many people who taught me that early on that I think of so often. And I think working with physicians, it's very much like that, because I have come to find that not all physicians, but almost everybody that works in healthcare at some level or another does tend to be traumatized, might be the wrong word, it might be a little bit too strong, but they certainly are impacted by the losses that they see or the things that they feel they can't do well enough. And so I think that the idea of people being hurt sometimes in the work that is so important has really helped me to understand what it's like to deliver care when you're getting tired or you're not sure you've got the right answers. And so I think it's really informed my work over the years.
Well, so it sounds like you in some ways bring a humbleness to it that kind of leads to a better listening. Am I hearing it right?
I hope that's part of it. It's so funny because when I was younger, I can remember my mom and I would be talking. I come from a very large Irish Catholic family in New York. And I can remember talking to my mom and her saying, what is it that you really wish before. And I really wish that I would never be judgmental and that I could be very kind to people. And I was little, and she used to tell that to people all the time. And so I think it has always been, I don't think I've always succeeded. I know I haven't. I'm too human for that. But it's always a goal. Man, it's, and when you enter a relationship with somebody and just help them tell their own story, I think there's so much healing that happens. And physicians have told me that. I mean, over and over again, the importance of being listened to is crucial to them.
Do you have any advice for people who are struggling with that, who may not have had that experience or the background you did?
In terms of trying to give them
how to be a better listener?
Yeah, I think mostly it's using your ears more than your mouth, as they say. But I also think it's part of two very simple things. One, when you're sitting with somebody, to not have to fill the silence. Sometimes silence is the one thing somebody needs so that they can actually get comfortable in what they want to say. And the other is eye contact. I can remember early on going to a funeral of one of the family members that had lost somebody to violence, and just sitting with them. And we didn't talk for a very long time. And she wrote me a note afterwards saying that she became so aware that nobody could look her in the eye when they were coming through to offer their condolences, and that there were just a handful of us that were actually able to look at her in the eye. And so I think being present, looking, listening, they're all crucial to giving people space.
So your background, I mentioned this part of family therapy that you did, but it sounds like you had quite a varied background. You moved a number of times. How did you get involved with the healthcare system?
Well, I always was in psychology in clinics, in a variety of hospitals, and I taught at universities. So I was teaching young people to be counselors. And so it just seemed a natural order to work with people. When I started out, I also worked in emergency services. That was another part of my training. So doing debriefings and that with police and fire and early responders was part of my background. So it just kind of morphed into the last job I had was really, I think, a real nice culmination of all my experiences, because I was teaching, I was consulting with the doctors, I was doing counseling. It just kind of pulled all my life experiences to this one job of physician well-being, and it was a blast.
Was that the director of the Center for Physician Wellbeing at AdventHealth?
Yes, yeah, it was.
So tell me more. But what were the biggest? What did you do in that role? Now you kind of did already, but go into more detail.
So it was an opportunity to really, the person who had started the program before brought me in. And so we did a few things together and built out some retreats and some trainings, and really got and I had an opportunity to get to know the physicians. And then she left and I stepped into the director role, and I really wanted to work very hard at getting the physicians to know me, not so much as Kathy, the psychologist, but just Kathy. And so I spent a lot of time in the lounges and rounding with them in their centers or on the floors at the hospital. And I think the most important part for me was really just being present with them and learning what their life was like. I mean, they let me go in everywhere. I was in the operating room with them. I would be on consults with them with their patients. It was just really a wonderful opportunity. And so I got to see some of the things that they were really being challenged with through the system, and able to help them articulate what would make it better. So we put in place quite a few, again, retreats, some educational workshops. We did some counseling and then consulting, which was really a lot of fun, because then I could go and look at either their teams, or I could just go with them and spend a day seeing how they did their work and make some suggestions. And the first time I did it, I was with a neurologist, and I spent a day with him, and his day started at 5 a.m. and we were still in the hospital working at 8 p.m. And, it had just been a hectic day. And I wrote up my report and I had my suggestions. And the simplest thing that he was doing, he was so good at connecting with patients, but what he was doing is he would do all the right things, but at the end of his time with every patient, he never closed it out. He never said, okay, this is what we just talked about, and this is what's going to happen next, and this is when you'll see me again. And so, and then he would do the same thing. He would leave kind of walking out the door saying something. So the patients would be left a little confused. And then he'd go out and he'd start telling nurses, and he would do the same thing. He'd be telling them like a drive-by. And when he stopped doing that and actually stopped and closed out every conversation, he got fewer calls from the nurses on the floors asking for the orders to be regiven. And it was a simple thing. And he was so appreciative of that. And so that was nice. I like it when you can see an effect that you've had.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like also just an incredible learning experience for you. So you didn't, well, how did your understanding of the healthcare delivery system evolve as you did these types of work?
Unfortunately, I got quite disillusioned with some of it because the people that are making the decisions are often not asking the very people who are providing the services. So I really see a need, and it's still going on, where, the insurance companies and the government are putting in so many requirements. And we all know that it's a business. So I'm not naive about that. But at the same time, I wish that there were more people, more physicians, nurses, everybody that could be at the table to really talk about how when you put in this requirement, it affects this way of us providing care. So I'll give you an example, like patient experience has just, been at the forefront of everything for so long. And I love that they're worried about patients. I'm a patient, and I'm getting older. I will be more of a patient. And so I think it's important. However, I think that there's been confusion about patient satisfaction and patient outcomes. And physicians are not interested in whether or not the patient likes them. They're interested in whether or not they've provided the service to the best of their ability and that they've helped with the quality of life. And we're not capturing that. And so there's a lot of frustration. And then I think the other thing I don't like about the system is that we've gotten to a point where everybody is so separate in their roles that often the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So an example, when we have a physician who puts in a consult for somebody with a specialty, and the specialist might go in and do a whole bunch of work, but then the hospitalist doesn't know it right away, or they don't communicate, and there's this hierarchy that's developed between nurses and doctors and specialists, and it just doesn't serve anyone well that I can see. I'm much more of a collaborative, and I think that's also what I learned from working in poor, disenfranchised communities, that you cannot ever not invite them to the table. You have to include them in the service that you want to give them, because otherwise it might look like they need one thing, but in fact, it's a completely different thing that they need. And I have found that's very true with physicians. We've tried so many things, and some of them just fall flat, because I think the biggest challenge is physicians being able to articulate what it is that they actually need. And part of that is because they're not at the table to even know what their options are.
And so do they know what they need to do, what they can potentially do to support their profession?
I don't think that they know it. I don't think, well, they probably know. I don't think they have confidence that it will make a difference, which is probably more disheartening. So there are a lot of physicians who come in who are really despondent about, well, I don't know what else to do. They're exhausted, many of them, from feeling as though they're on a treadmill and they just keep working harder and harder and not really getting the satisfaction that they used to get. So a lot of the time what I've come to is that my focus when I was doing counseling or consulting was really to take the proponents and the parts of mindful living and try to incorporate them into the daily lives of our physicians and our nurses, where you live in the moment and you really stay focused. It winds up that your day is not as exhausting if you're not multitasking and you're not trying to do three things at once. If you can just stay focused, it really does help.
And what do you find works best for helping people to be mindful living?
I think breaking it down into the most simple steps. So the one that I start with every time is for them to start just taking a simple breath during their day. And people have called it the doorknob experience. We used to do it years ago with people who had real trauma. We would want to incorporate into their day just places where they stop, pause, recenter themselves. And so with physicians and nurses, that's what you say. When you get to a door, when you're coming from one patient to another, stop, take a deep breath, leave the old patient behind before you enter the room of the new patient. And it serves many purposes. One, you get oxygen, which you need. It slows you down just a little bit, and it gives you focus so that you can be present to the new person without the chatter of that old patient in your voice, in your head.
Wow, so you did a lot while you were at Advent. Any particular stories jump out as the most gratifying?
Oh, well, the one story that I tell all the time. And so if people are listening to the podcast and they say, oh, that's Kathy Gibney's story, I own it. It is the one that was most profound for me. And that was a young physician who came in. He actually called me one day and he said, Dr. Gibney, I really need to see you. My colleagues are concerned. And they said, I really need to be seen today. So I said to him, all right, I'm finished at 8 tonight. So we agreed to meet at the end of the day. And he came in and he just started crying, sobbing, Michael. It was so sad. I mean, he was just crying and kept repeating, I can't do this. I can't do this. He finally calmed down and I said to him, please tell me what is happening. What is going on for you right now? And he said, I just can't do this anymore. He was only 3 years out of residency. He was working in the hospital. He was doing shifts and he was there, 14, 15, 16 hours a day. He had 2 young children at home. He said, my wife is taking care of everything. I go home. She's already gotten the kids in bed or ready for bed. I come in, I plop on the couch. The kids, if they're up, they climb all over me, or I just sit there. My wife has saved dinner for me. Sometimes I eat it, sometimes I don't. I asked him to go home and take a shower that day. I said, just do one thing for me. Go home, take a shower. It was summertime. He went home, he took a shower. So he called me 2 days later. I said to him, let's meet in 3 days, and I want to hear about what happened. Of course, he thought I was crazy saying, just go take a shower. He's just, and they often think what I suggest is a little bit off, but then when they do it, it kind of helps. So anyway, a couple of days later, instead of 3, he called me. He says, Kathy, I really want to see you. Can we meet? I said, yeah, why don't you come in at noon? I have a half an hour. He came in, he sat down on the couch and he said, I couldn't wait. I had to tell you. I said, what happened? He said, I went home, I took a shower, I put on shorts and a t-shirt and I came out. It was summertime. So he walked around the corner with his 6-year-old. And she just talked to him about what she'd done during the day. She came home. He came home. They came back. And his little 4-year-old was sitting there looking at him like, how come I didn't get to go? And he said, come on, buddy, let's go in the yard. And he said, can I take my flashlight? So he took his flashlight and they were out there. And he said, Kathy, we were not out there long. We picked up some rocks and stones and I came back in. That's not what I want to tell you. He said, I didn't even put them to bed. My wife still put them to bed. I felt a little bit better though. He said, but what I wanted to tell you is what happened yesterday when I came home. I came home and my daughter, my 6-year-old, came running to the door as soon as I came in. And she said, Daddy, will you be the daddy you were last night? We both started crying, I'll tell you. And he said, I need you to help me be that daddy. And I said, Michael, the beauty of your story is that you are that daddy. You just need to make sure you're putting that focus on that when you're there. You can't do it when you're at work, but when you're home, you can. And he did. And it's been, he stays in touch. He just every once in a while will write me a note. His wife wrote me a thank you note. I mean, it was one of those profound moments for that family. And I just think that was such a blessing. And the reason I told him to take a shower was because another thing that I learned from my patients over the years is that we need time to transition between our roles. So when I go and come from work, I don't have the radio on in my car. I listen to the sounds around me or I think about other things, but I use transition time and everybody can do that in different ways.
That's amazing. It's also amazing because coming from medicine and thinking about all that doctors have to learn, things take a lot of effort to learn them. And taking a shower is one of those easy things. It's amazing something so simple can have such a profound effect.
Yes, and that's the frustration sometimes with working with physicians is that, everything has to be research grounded. And yes, we've got a lot of research about mindfulness and trauma responses and moral injury. But really, when it comes down to it, it is so simple to learn to stay in the moment. But at the same time, it's extremely challenging because there's so much pulling us in 15 directions.
Did you have stories of people who were more challenging to get them to stay in the moment and how you overcame those?
Yes, there are always those that will be yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. So my fun curmudgeon story is this one physician who was strongly recommended to come talk to me by his colleague. And he called and he made an appointment and he came in and he was the most negative, angry guy. And he would just go on and on and on. And he had a complaint about everything, and he actually said, I'd be fine with medicine if I just didn't have to deal with the patients. It's like, okay. So for him, I said, you know what I want you to do? And he complained about his wife and he complained. So I said to him, what I want you to do today is I want you to go home and I want you to take your wife out to dinner and I want you to just forget about work. And on your way home, I want you to notice this beautiful tree that's out on I-4, which is the major highway in Orlando. And so he came back. I said, and then I want to see you in a couple of days. So he came back for a second appointment and he sat down and he was such a crotchety. Oh, nothing's working. It was terrible. I hated it. Da, da, da. And I had been in his office in between. And so I said to him, you have an ice maker in there. Nobody has an ice maker in their office anymore. It was great. I had ice in my water. He said, oh, the darn thing is broken. I said, oh my goodness. So anyway, I said to him, well, what happened? Did you go do it? He said, no. I said, all right, now you're going to do it tonight. So next time he came, he said, yep, I did it. I said, what happened? He said, Kathy, I am really in bad shape. I said, what do you mean? He said, I picked up my wife. We were going out to dinner and we passed that tree you told me about that was blossoming. And I said, oh, that tree is beautiful. And he said, my wife started crying and said, oh my God, you're dying. You're taking me to dinner to tell me that you're dying. He said, she actually thought because I said something positive that I must be dying. I said, yes, that gives you an insight into how badly he had gotten negative. And he still works on it. He'll always be a curmudgeon, but he knows now and his friends can call him out on it. And he'll always see the negative first, but he knows that he can reframe it if he puts a little effort into it.
So what advice might you give a younger version of yourself who kind of enters a similar organization? How do you get the organization to appreciate these sort of issues?
Wow. I don't have an answer for that because I'm not sure that organizations really do appreciate it completely yet. I think that there are a lot of people doing wonderful things in well-being across the board. But I think that, again, there are so many things that are pulling, especially financial and organizational responsibilities, what has to be documented, all of this. I think that people get lost in that. And I do think that there are some things that would be helpful, but for physicians as well as, and I think the first thing is, I think administrators and physicians and all healthcare need to get at the table together. And I think that they need to understand that they're speaking a different language from one another. And, that again, physician experience is not patient outcome is not patient experience. I think that physicians need to speak more together and not separate themselves out from all of the other people in healthcare. I think that everybody should be finding the places where they overlap in what they're doing, not just all be specialists, but really appreciate that nobody can provide full care without everybody contributing. And that's where I think multidisciplinary teams, which I had the pleasure of working with a group in Boston and another time in Atlanta, they make a difference when they're truly multidisciplinary and people can really bring in diversity and not only in the skill sets, but in their worldviews. It really helps. So I think that's something that people could work on. I think not expecting psychologists or psychology to be the principal's office and waiting until they see that somebody's in trouble, but putting in prevention programs, for me, the thing that made the difference was having relationships with the people that I worked with before they were asked to come to see me. That way they were self-referred. When they know you as a person, then they seek you out. They want to talk to you. And so I would say that's a big thing, because then you can teach them about the mindful things, being present and having gratitude and taking time with the people that are important to you. So I think those are important things. And I think reminding administrators and physicians that professionalism matters. I think speaking respectfully and honoring what you bring to the table as different, but both very important, I think that makes a difference.
So Kathy, what's next for you?
I keep being asked to do some different things, and I'm not sure. I think that I really am enjoying some time off. I've been doing some projects with the hospital during COVID, and that was very satisfying. But I think that I'm ready to spend some more time with my own family. And, I still like to have people who I mentor. And that's good, because I think we need to have more people in healthcare that do know about counseling and consulting and taking care of themselves. Self-care is crucial for everybody, and we really see it during COVID.
Absolutely. So I think we're pretty much close to our time up today, but I wanted to just give you a chance for any final words of wisdom or reflection you'd like to share.
I don't have any words of wisdom.
Oh, you have plenty
I
of
thought
words of
about,
wisdom.
thank you, Michael. I thought about sharing an Irish blessing that I've done with at the end of my workshops or retreats, but then I was thinking, I think I'll share this poem instead. I have used it before. It's actually written by a chaplain for patients, and I kind of adapted it a little bit for physicians, and I think I would like to share that. It's called "Stay with Me." It was originally written by Monique Carandillo, but it's called "Stay with Me." So it says this: "Stay with me. I am tired and unsure. Walk with me as I tell you my story of joys and sorrows, of proud moments and times I now regret. Abide with me in silence without judgment. Companion me. Pace your step to mine. Walk slowly. Tread gently in the waters of my life. Be with me, a faithful presence, an open mind, a mirror and a well. See with me what lies beneath, behind, beyond this particular place. Search with me for a guiding hope and the light I can no longer see. Feel with me the anger I may hide, the sadness I conceal, the uncertainty of my day. Hold for me all that I give to you in this brief and graceful moment. Pray with me to the love that calls us both to this room today." And the reason I like it for physicians is because I truly believe that they need to be in touch with their emotions and learn to use them. And I think this speaks to all of that.
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful way to end the episode today of the podcast. So thank you for joining us today, and look forward to working with you and talking to you in the future as well.
Thank you, Michael. Good luck with all of this. I think you're so brave.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Well, that's our show for today. I want to thank Dr. Kathy Gibney for joining us today and for sharing both her insights and personal story. For those of you who wish to talk to Kathy, you can reach her by calling 404-783-0675. If you wish to learn more about the Coalition, please visit our website at www.forphysicianwellbeing.org. You can also check us out on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I also want to thank our volunteers and the staff from the Coalition who made this podcast possible. Finally, I'd like to thank ACESIS, ACESIS Incorporated, for sponsoring my time working on this podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and his guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Coalition for Physician Wellbeing, its board, or other members of the Coalition. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Brown, wishing our caregivers out there meaning, purpose, and joy in the practice of medicine. Together we are stronger. Until next time.